Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at Temy. Temy is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. And each week, we interview successful leaders who share the unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we are lucky enough to be joined by an amazing guest, Jim Biniyaz, CEO at ResilientX Security. Hello, Jim. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hello, Barry. Thank you for having me today. Thank you.
No. The pleasure is all ours. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. So, anyone who doesn't know you, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the company that you work at?
I founded ResilientX around 2022 with the objective, to help companies that have, problems with compliance. And let's say we have a lot of European compliance, such as, NIS2, DORA. These are very famous European compliance. And there were, most of these companies were using, consultants and all the activities were probably manual. So essentially, the idea of ResilientX was to create, solutions and products for cybersecurity market to help companies to, let's say, hyper automate everything into their processes. So essentially, we did, currently we have two products in the market, and we focus, on these aspects, which are supply chain and posture management currently.
Very interesting. What was it in particular about like security and compliance that drew your attention?
So essentially, compliance is a sword with double blade, because sometimes it helps you, in terms of, having the security, going on. On the other side, it does really, you as a company, you really require security to be able to sell. Because as soon as maybe you start to work with mid-size enterprises, large enterprises, they would be demanding, cybersecurity. And the best way to, of course, achieve let's say the baseline for the cybersecurity is, starting with a couple of, certifications or, compliances based, on, of course, the geographic and where the company is based. But this is, the idea. So compliance is the start to have some basic security in the companies.
And when you were younger, did you always think like, oh, I want to be a CEO or I want to be an entrepreneur, or was it something that you just happened to come across?
Yeah, it actually happened because I have started my career as a software developer. So I was a software developer initially, working with various cybersecurity companies, and that's how, I got into cybersecurity and cyberspace. But eventually, I saw the opportunity that you can, create a lot of value in cybersecurity. Although a lot of companies might not see cybersecurity as a value and something like as a cost, but still, safeguarding, different companies, it's actually, have its own satisfaction.
Well, at least with this company, there's always going to be a demand, isn't there? It's not like you can escape from compliance or security. So there's always going to be a demand for that. Is there a particular problem like in the cybersecurity landscape that inspired you to start ResilientX Security?
What actually, inspired me, specifically in cybersecurity is, the attacks usually happen for a couple of very simple reasons. Okay. It's either, a technological, problem. It's either, a human error, human mistake. And in other scenarios, other, let's say, human interventions, that cause cybersecurity problems. So essentially, it's the cause of cybersecurity, cyber problems are very easy, but resolving those causes, it's actually that is the biggest challenge, because the route might be very, very simple, but achieving to the ideal situation is not.
And I noticed on your LinkedIn you talked about resilience. Like, how do you define like cyber resilience, and how does that differ from like other forms of security approaches?
Yeah. So cyber resilience is actually, I believe it's more even some kind of mentality. Uh, I don't know if you've noticed, but recently even we have, cyber resilience officer. So we do have, even a new title in the large corporations, especially for resiliency, because resiliency is not only, let's say, to be able to defend, but also know in case of, an attack what should the company do. So it's essentially, incorporates that basic, compliance, but also have, let's say, the security by design mentality that puts the company at least, one step ahead of of their competitors, at least.
And does your approach differ depending on the size of the company? So I'd assume that maybe a small to medium or large size company would have a different approach, but maybe I'm wrong in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. The size of the, especially the number of the employees of the companies is very, very important. Another factor is, which is very, very serious, is what actually the company does. So if they are, for example, a software development company, okay, they do need to implement, different set of measures. If they're manufacturing, they need to have other set of measures. So it's really based on the industry and based on, let's say, the number, of course, of the people involved in the processes. Of course, there are some baselines that applies to everybody. So something like, as I mentioned, the compliance, some certificates are for everybody. Something like in US, we have SOC 2. In Europe, we do have ISO 27001. It's very becoming super famous. So this is essentially, let's say, the basics that most of the companies need to implement. But more, assets you have, more protection you need.
Yeah. And when you're working with these clients, like what is like the most important first step when you're trying to like assess their cyber resilience?
So I think the first step, exactly as you mentioned, is, let's say, an assessment of the situation as is. So you need to be able to show to the company, okay, how the situation, the situation that they have currently, how much, risk is it involved. Okay, because we do have various type of risks. It can be, we have reputational risk, we have legal risk, we have cyber risk, and various even types of cyber risk. So I think the first step is to show what are the risks to the company. So for example, I don't know, if they develop, let's say, SaaS solutions, okay, SaaS might be one of, the attack vectors. Okay, so if in the SaaS they do have, various integrations and send data maybe to multiple third-party companies, maybe the third-party attack can be, some sort of important. So based on what company does, it's actually, you can frame what parts are more important and which part needs more attention.
Are there any like common pitfalls when organizations come to you and you see the same approach every time, especially when like trying to integrate like new security solutions?
Coming back to your question, essentially, there are basic things that companies need to do. Okay, so for example, you can understand if a company, is investing in cybersecurity. If, for example, at least they do one penetration testing per year, it's an simulation of an attack to, different set of services that the company have, for example, a web application, or it can be even to the infrastructure. So if a company does not have these, let's say, security processes, you will understand that they don't have that basics. And where they can get maybe those basics, maybe it's easily come from the compliance, because at least it has, made some bullet points about basic necessities of companies that they should maintain.
And when we're talking about the kind of things that you offer, is it prevention? Is it detection? Is it response? Or is it like a combination of all three of them?
So it is a combination. For example, we do have a product for supply chain and third-party risk management. So just to give you an idea, a company, maybe a mid-sized company or a large organization, they do have hundreds of vendors, or maybe 200 vendors. Okay, so, and they work with these vendors every day. They exchange information. This information can be financial information, legal information, even intellectual property with those vendors. But if one of those vendors, one of those third-party companies, get a cyber attack, of course it has an impact, let's say, to the mother company, so to the customer. So this is actually a very, let's say, difficult situation to solve, because you have 200 companies that you need to, let's say, be sure that they maintain the least, some security, at least. So we solve it, for example, with an end-to-end collaborative platform. This, we analyze the risk of the vendors, we send questionnaires, we, analyze the different set of documents. So essentially, in this case, for example, solving this problem, which is supply chain attack, require, a specific tool.
And if you're thinking like what kinds of cybersecurity trends or attack vectors concern you the most right now?
So I think there are a couple of new, it's not new, it's kind of old types, but with AI having appeared in the last years, it's getting more and more attention. I see right now much more complicated, phishing attacks, which are really really targeted to the user. Maybe it has, we did I did a webinar couple of months ago in Italian about how, let's say, attackers are using AI to analyze even the person before sending the phishing email. So they can analyze what kind of maybe website they use, maybe what kind of posts they put on social media, so they can send a very targeted email attack, phishing. But this AI, of course, it opens up to a lot of information sharing, which I think this is a very very big problem to solve in the upcoming years, because people and even in the companies, we do share a lot of information with AI, and we don't know where it's saved. So it's some sort of concern also for privacy and how these information are getting used. So there are many many type of different set of problems that are rising. Hopefully, there will be multiple companies and multiple organizations to solve these issues.
Yeah, so AI is really becoming dominant. Every business, I think, is starting to become impacted by AI, and cybersecurity will be no less effective. If you're looking to the future and thinking about how AI is going to like change the future of cyber defense, what would you say would be the most notable way that it would change it?
Yeah, so I think most of, let's say, the junior level tasks of cybersecurity, I think it can be done with AI, probably with it's hard to say the time, but I think in the next at least 1 or 2 years. Because right now, of course, if you try out this OpenAI or other companies, you can see that their models are really really getting better every day. And in many cases it does have even more information, more knowledge of in if you consider a typical student, for example, in cybersecurity, they might have probably less knowledge than the open AI. It's a matter, I guess, of computational power, at least, because more data you feed, of course, you need more computational power. But when we get there, I think most of the activities which were something like the junior level activities in cybersecurity, in compliance, maybe in defense, in offense, so cybersecurity in general, would not say disappear, but would change. Maybe they would be operators of the AI tools to get to a specific, achieve a specific result.
So everyone is talking about AI, but the next thing coming up is also quantum computing. Do you have opinion on quantum computing? Will it change the way that companies will need to develop, especially in relation to cybersecurity?
Yeah. So absolutely, quantum computing is let's say, it's a big innovation which also impacts a lot, especially for example, the cryptography in cybersecurity. So currently, for example, if you're signed up on any kind of website, maybe your even bank is using certain encryption systems. Okay, so for example, not everybody can access your password, so not everybody can maybe do changes on your bank account because it's encrypted with some sort of encryption. The quantum computing, of course, it facilitates breaking these encryptions. So there will be, of course, a wave. I'm sure there will be a wave of changing these encryptions and keeping up with the power of quantum computing. I just I'm hopeful to see one of them soon in the market for at least operational things.
Yeah, I think it's going to be revolutionary. I am kind of excited, but also a little bit apprehensive about it as well, for the very reasons that you've just mentioned. Um, if we're talking about your company and like when you first like onboard new clients, Do you ever get met with like a sense of skepticism about having new security vendors or new security processes, or are people quite open-minded about it?
It really depends, especially for example, usually smaller, smaller customers, especially for example, SME, if I can, categorize them, they are a bit more open to working maybe with maybe to new vendor. If you're all, offering maybe a good customer service, maybe you present the product, better than others do, and so they might choose you. Of course, especially in Europe, this is because we operate mostly in Europe. On the large enterprise, segment, it's a bit harder to, of course, get to, big guys, let's say big contracts, because it's also a matter of trust, I assume. So they prefer maybe to work with, companies that they have at least, 5 to 10 years of life. So that's, the startup mentality that I think it misses, in EU, which does not support, that fast growth of startups.
And what advice would you give to companies other than like buying your product, which you can say as an answer, of course, it comes to strengthening the cyber resilience, but they don't know where to start?
I would start from basics, So what I would do is I will see, the industry that I'm operating in. Okay, so for example, if you're I don't know, a financial or a startup, even in fintech, for example, just to make an example, there are some regulations that apply to you. Okay, and still the best way to understand, what would be the let's say the minimum level of security that you need to implement is, again, go and see, your basics, what you need to do in, for example, as some kind of fintech. Maybe you need to apply maybe for DORA, it's some kind of European cybersecurity, and what essentially you need to do, you need to understand when those kind of compliances can get applied to your company. So this is, the second step that I would suggest. Of course, you would need, some expert in the matter to help you, to especially map maybe what you did, what you need to do. So this is how I would suggest any company. So start from compliance and certificates.
And maybe this is a bit of a foolish question, but like, is there a problem out there that if you could solve it in like one go, what would it be, for example?
I would probably start to work on, so in better, that's a bit hard to answer because there are a couple of, stuff that we're working on. We see many of, a lot of opportunity, especially in this, in compliance market. Okay, because a lot of people that I see that they work, especially even, let's say, mid-sized companies, okay, they're not only, investing in cybersecurity. So they're investing also in, let's say, their own sales, because they have maybe more certificates to show to their customers. So this is one of the biggest things that I guess it really matters in terms of, solving a challenge. The other part is, of course, which is not solved yet, is some sort of, secure communication between companies. So, for example, how a company maybe can show to another company which, they have the basic security. So right now, how it's being done is maybe they send a couple of emails back and forth to, long procurement processes and so on. But we don't have something like, a trust exchange, solution, which, companies can actually collaborate with each other. Similar how we do on LinkedIn. So for example, maybe we see each other on LinkedIn, we go on LinkedIn and, just see maybe, I don't know, what I have studied, where did I work in, and some basic information. There is no such thing for security of the companies.
One of the final questions I'd like to ask is the future of the company. Obviously, you don't need to give away any trade secrets or anything, but like, where do you see ResilientX Security over the next decade?
Over the next decade, where I see ourselves is, so we are actually, let's say, we want to solve a specific problem mostly for European companies. So our focus is a bit European compliances. Until now, what we did was solving, let's say, part of a very big problem. Okay, so for example, I don't know, you needed to manage the supply chain security because of, I don't know, some sort of regulation, and we helped you to manage that. But what we want to, focus on in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years is automation of a lot of activities with AI, which you did manually in past. For example, we want to, you know, we do have an assessment platform, but we want to, a bit bring AI into it and also perform, some penetration testings with AI. Also, on the other hand, work on completing our offering in compliance side, so we can, let's say, automate this process for our customers.
That sounds really interesting. Just a quick question. Like you mentioned a couple of times that your kind of like strategy is mainly based around Europe. Is that something that you would like to expand in the future, or are you quite happy where you are in terms of the geographical location?
So I think there are, it's also a bit based on the geographical location because, let's say, there are many companies in US. Okay, to be also fair, you know the biggest investors are always, from US or maybe from other countries such as, Israel or, the countries who invest in cybersecurity. Europe has had always this lack of cybersecurity, but on the other hand, Europe had always the first regulations. Okay. So
I'm not surprised to hear you say that.
the first regulations. And I think this is a good opportunity because mostly companies will get incorporated to solve problems in US because there is a much more bigger market, much more, fluid market. People, accept startups very, very maybe faster than Europe. But also there is this big challenge in Europe, there are, a lot of regulations, no companies to solve, which I guess it has its own, unique opportunity for us.
Amazing. And the final thing I'd like to ask you just before we finish is what advice would you give to other people like yourselves when you were younger, first starting the company, first becoming a CEO? What is the best advice that you could give them right now?
Yeah, my advice would be probably to just start, you know, just to start. It's I think this is the just to start and probably never stop. So
Are you a procrastinator? When you first started the company, were you like umming and ahhing? It's like, oh, should I do it? Should I not do it? Or did you know, like, no, this is it, 100%, I'm doing it, and you just headed there?
no, I think every normal human being will have doubt at some point in their life. This is, and I think especially if you open a company and work with start to work, especially as some sort of startup, you want to innovate, you want to develop, so it has its own difficulty. But I think also the experience is much more, let's say, beautiful. Because you learn so much, you understand, how really you can solve a problem, and I think it kind of have its own lessons, and I'm let's say until now I didn't have any doubts, so I can say that.
So the procrastinator in us, it just means that we're human, right? That's what you're saying.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Jim, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure was mine, and thank you for having me again.
You're
Thank you.
very welcome. That was Jim Biniyaz, CEO at ResilientX Security.